This video contains the mindset, tools, and strategies that I've used to find the perfect apartment on multiple occasions. You need to watch this if you're a renter, especially if you live in a competitive marketplace, which is essentially every city in America these days. All right, I've got a lot to say and not a lot of time to say it, so let's get going. To give you an idea of my expertise on the topic, I worked in the multifamily housing industry for almost 10 years. During that time, I was a leasing specialist, a relocation specialist, and a fully licensed real estate agent in the state of Washington. In addition, I'm a renter. In the last 9 years, I've leased 6 apartments, which, by the way, just goes to show the perfect apartment today might not be the perfect apartment tomorrow. But that's one of the great things about being a renter. Also, I live in Seattle, which is one of the top 10 most competitive markets in the country. So if you're going to talk to somebody about apartments, you could do a lot worse than me. Also, these are just my personal opinions, and they in no way substitute for professional legal, financial, or real estate advice. And not all of these tips are going to pertain to everyone, so your mileage may vary. All right, moving on. The first thing that you need to know is that it's absolutely okay to be a renter. In fact, in many situations, you're much better off renting than you are buying. The idea that it's always better to buy is a dogma, and it's often wrong, especially for millennials. Seriously, this is a huge pet peeve of mine. Buying is really expensive. As a share of your income, even starter homes cost much more than they have in the past. I know that we've all heard plenty of stories of people buying homes for much less than they sold them for, but it takes a lot more than that to calculate the return on an investment. You have to include taxes, cost of maintenance, the cost of financing, and the list goes on. There are plenty of really good reasons to buy a home, and if you can put 20% down, the financials are going to work out just fine. I'm not anti-home buying, and I don't fault any home buyers out there. Buying a home is pretty awesome, and working with first-time home buyers was my favorite part of the job back when I was a broker. But if you're buying instead of renting simply because you've been told that renting is throwing away your money, you might be following bad advice. If you account for all the expenses that go into buying a home, there's a really good chance that the money that actually gets invested would have very similar returns if you were to invest it in retirement funds instead. So it's important that you really think about whether or not you're ready for all of the things that come with buying a home. Are you ready to be tied to a mortgage? Are you ready to be tied to a specific location? Are you ready for all of that upkeep that comes with a home? And this one's really important. Are you ready to live in the location where you can reasonably actually afford to buy? Because if the answer is no to any of those questions, it's completely reasonable and smart to continue renting. And too often I see people make sacrifices that they don't really need to make with their rental just because they feel bad that they're a renter. Before I forget, I'm going to give one big caveat to this opinion because I do know it's a controversial opinion at the end of this video, so stick around if you're curious. Number 2, don't let yourself get overwhelmed by technology. There are a ton of apartment finding websites and apps out there these days, but a lot of them have very redundant capabilities or they're showing you the same listings. Many of them are owned by the same companies, so even if you went to different apps, you'd see all the same stuff. For example, Trulia, Zillow, HotPads, they're all owned by Zillow Group, so it doesn't matter which app you use, you're seeing the same apartments, you're seeing the same vacancies. That being said, they all do have different user experiences, so it's worth it for you to kind of test them all out and see which one works best for you. For example, HotPads offers a really minimalist user interface, and they have a feature that I personally love where after you're done looking at all the vacancies in a building, that apartment building's icon will turn gray until they've updated their listing. That way it's really easy to see just by looking at the map where the new vacancies that you haven't seen since the last time you looked are. But it wouldn't make sense for me to be using HotPads and Zillow at the same time because both apps are going to show me all of the same vacancies. That being said, property management companies have to pay these websites in order to post their listings, and they're not always going to pay all of them. So if you're only using apps from one company, there's probably vacancies that you're missing in your area. In my experience, if you're using apartments.com and one of the Zillow Group sites, you're not going to miss much. And in full disclosure, I did used to work for Zillow Group, but I've used pretty much all of these apps and most of them are just fine. My whole point is just test them out, find which 2 or 3 you personally really like, and then put that part of your search to bed. Don't worry about it anymore. Next, categorize your needs. You're going to want to have at least 3 different categories for the different attributes and features in a potential new home. Stuff that you would categorize as a must-have, a would really like, and an absolutely not. I recommend writing these down by hand before you start playing with the filters in your phone. There's going to be some really easy stuff when it comes time to build your saved searches, like price and location and type of property. But then there's the stuff that might matter a lot to you, but doesn't always come up as options in your filters on the apps. And you don't want to build an unconscious bias against them just because the app didn't care about them as much as you do. For example, I hate carpet, but not all apps let you filter for flooring type. And even if they do, the property management company isn't always going to be accurate when they're inputting that information into the listing. So I'm much better off leaving that attribute on my handwritten list and just relying on the photos or conversations with the leasing agent than trying to put it into a saved search and potentially missing listings that I'd actually like to go see. This is going to save you a ton of time down the road, especially when you're searching with a partner. When Aaron and I started to look for our new place, we got into a room with a whiteboard. We modeled all this out so that we knew what was important to us. Seriously, we literally put time on a calendar, locked ourselves into a room, and hashed this all out. Let me give you a sense of what that looked like. I love to cook, so I gotta have a gas range. I know other people might not care that much, but it's a must-have for me. On the other hand, Aaron has to have a double vanity in the bathroom. It's non-negotiable. I don't care that much, but that doesn't matter. It's a must-have for one of us, so it's a must-have for both of us. After we were done filling out those columns, we ran a search based on what we had come up with. It turned out that only 3 buildings fit our criteria. And just like that, what had started out as this intimidating apartment search was whittled down to just a handful of perfect apartments. Now, just because you found the perfect apartment doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to be available when you're ready to move. Well, that's where my next tip comes in. Give yourself as much time as possible. I know that most of us have certain time constraints when it comes time to move, even if it's just when your current lease is up. But I urge you to start your search as early as possible, and there's a really good reason for that. The chances of your perfect apartment being available when you're ready to move go up exponentially the earlier that you find it. When you find the perfect floor plan in the perfect building, let the leasing team know what your moving window is. That way they can put you on a mailing list and alert you when a vacancy comes up. Depending on the laws in your market, this might vary slightly, but you almost always have a competitive advantage by being on a mailing list for a floor plan. Aaron and I found our floor plan 4 months early. We put our name on a list, and in a couple months, the leasing team let us know that somebody had put in early notice that they would be vacating. We put a deposit down knowing that if the same floor plan later became available on a higher floor, we'd be able to just transfer the deposit. But in the meantime, it allowed us to start hiring movers and making other really important arrangements. It made everything so much easier. Start your search early. Now that I started making this video, I realized that there's so many more tips that I want to give you, but the video is already getting pretty long, so I'm only going to do one more. Let me know if you're interested, and maybe I'll make a sequel somewhere down the line. But this next one's for all of my renters out there with pets. Consider certifying your pet as an emotional support animal. Now, for reasons that I don't really understand, this is actually sort of a controversial opinion, and depending on where you live, it might be a moot point because certain markets only accommodate for service animals, but hear me out. In my personal opinion, pet rent and pet deposits, they're just discrimination. No one should have an increased barrier for living in a home that they love simply because of a pet that they love. And a property manager who can't fathom renting to somebody without extracting more money out of them because they're a pet owner, I don't know, maybe they should consider a different line of work. ESA certificates are readily available, and in many markets, including Seattle, they virtually protect you from all forms of pet discrimination. Pet rent, pet deposit, breed restrictions, they're immoral. Don't feel bad about avoiding them. And there you have it. If you want to find the perfect apartment, embrace being a renter and don't worry about those who think renting is bad. Stick with 2 or 3 of your favorite apps so that you don't get overwhelmed by the technology. Categorize your needs. Make it that much easier for you to tell the difference between an apartment that you like and the one that you love. Give yourself plenty of time. Maximize the chances that your perfect apartment will be ready when it's time for you to move. And consider certifying your pet as an emotional support animal. so that you can avoid pet-based discrimination. All right, don't worry, I didn't forget about you. As I promised, here's my super secret caveat to my opinion about buying versus renting. If you have the money for a down payment and you really want to invest in real estate, but you live in an expensive area, consider not living in the house that you buy. One of the best arguments for buying is the opportunity to pay off a mortgage by the time you retire. Because if you retire without housing expenses, then you're greatly going to extend your retirement income. Let me give you a sense of what this would look like. So it doesn't make any sense for me to buy in Seattle. If I were to maintain my lifestyle, I'd have to buy a condo. And then the HOA fees are really going to cut into the return on my investment. And to be frank, a condo that's as nice as my apartment is going to cost so much more. But I could invest in a different market that's more affordable than Seattle, but is growing just as fast, if not faster. And then while I'm renting here, a tenant could be paying my mortgage there. Then when it is time to retire, I could always just move to that place or transfer that asset to the place I would like to retire to. Not many people consider this strategy, but it's an option. All right, we went way too long. Comment, like, subscribe, share. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week.